Hello, everybody. I hope to find you very well. My name is Juan de Dios Cincunegui. I am Deputy Director of the International Center for Parliamentary Studies, Research and Foresight at the School of Politics, Government and International Relations in Universidad Austral in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Very good to see you. What I want to do today is basically to represent my paper that I presented last Saturday in the Wroxton workshop for parliamentary scholars and parliamentarians. It was the 17th version of this important workshop. The one was created in 1994. And in my particular case, I've been a decade participating, learning a lot from my colleagues from all over the world. The first one that I remember I participated was 2017, and this has been the fifth. So 10 years of Wroxton for me. Great community led by Philip Lord Norton of Louth, who is the director of the Center for Legislative Studies at the University of Hull in the United Kingdom. And it is so important that of course, it has the support of the Interparliamentary Union. Well, it will be amazing to present this paper. I'm going to share my presentation right now. I hope you will enjoy it. And of course, I want to hear your opinion, your critics, your comments, whatever you consider positive about the presentation. Thank you very much again for listening and for watching this video. So as you can see, the title of my thesis is Parliament in the Eye of the Storm, Democratic Control, Systemic Risk, and Generative Artificial Intelligence. The thesis I will present today, inevitable, leads us to ask what kind of parliaments has AI encountered in each of our communities, countries, and regions? What interests guide its adoption? And what capabilities will it enhance? And under what rules will it operate? But before we ask ourselves these questions, we must recognize that the world has changed again, and that this change entails a further weakening of the concept of democracy in parallel with the loss of trust in politics and institutions. We meet at a moment when two storms are converging over democratic government. The first is slow, the long erosion of democratic institutions, autocratization, polarization, corruption, declining trust, disinformation. Today, democracy is rarely abolished in one blow. It is dismantled layer by layer behind a constitutional facade. The press first, then the courts, the oversight bodies, the civil service, and so on. The second storm is fast and new. Since 2022, generative artificial intelligence has become a mass cognitive infrastructure used daily for writing, searching, analyzing, and increasingly for planning and executing multi-stage tasks. It is universal, it is dual use, hard to contain, and it is concentrated in a few hands. At the center of this architecture stand parliaments. And when parliaments fail, more than one branch of government malfunctions. Democracy's safety system is weakened. The paper advances three connected propositions. First, politics should be understood as a systemic critical risk activity, and it currently escapes the controls we demand of every other activity capable of large-scale collective harm. Second, Parliament should function as democracy's principal safety installation, its control room. Third, generative AI constitutes a critical juncture. It can deepen the informational asymmetries that already favor executives and large corporations, or it can equip parliaments with capacities they have never possessed. The outcome will depend less on the power of the technology than on the quality of the institutions that adopt it. Let me begin with the first proposition. Politics has a dual historical record. On the one hand, it is humanity's most powerful instrument of progress. Public health, mass education, infrastructure, science, the legal framework of markets, you name it. On the other hand, it is capable of producing violence, crime, poverty, and affecting the most basic human necessities, such as health, education, security, labor, housing, mobility, business, and so on. Now let us consider the criteria we use to classify an activity as critical. The state claims a monopoly on legitimate coercion. The magnitude of its decisions is universal. Political errors can be irreversible across generations. Government is a complex and interconnected system, and politics is a meta activity. It regulates all other systemic risks. In short, the regulator of regulators is too important to be governed solely by trust, improvisation, and sporadic electoral correction. Modern societies treat other high-risk fields. For example, we do not entrust nuclear safety, civil aviation, complex surgery, or systemic finance to the goodwill of individual operators. The social science of risk points the same way. High reliability organizations respond with redundancy, deference to expertise, and sensitivity to weak signals. Two design principles follow for public power. Radical redundancy, several genuinely independent barriers, human, technical, procedural, must stand between a public decision and collective harm. No one decides alone, no one executes without cross-validation. And institutionalized distrust. Constitutional democracy does not presume bad faith in every office holder, but it must be designed to withstand the one who acts in bad faith. Seen through this lens, constitutional democracy is a safety system humanity constructed for the operation of political power. Separation of powers is defense in deep. Due process and parliamentary procedure are operating protocols. Elections are a recurrent certification. A free press is an incident reporting system. Judicial and horizontal accountability are independent audits. Federalism and subsidiarity limit the radius of failure. And this reframing has one sharp implication. Democratic erosion is not merely a change in political style. It is the dismantling of safety barriers inside a critical installation that remains in operation. Which brings me to the second proposition. Within that safety architecture, Parliament is not simple, one barrier among others. It is a control room, as I've been saying, the institution in which the plurality of those affected should be able to observe the operation of power, question those at the controls, and when necessary, stop or correct it. Why parliaments? Because their purpose is to give institutional form to pluralism. Parliaments organize the coexistence of competing interests, identities, and visions. But electoral legitimacy, indispensable as it is not sufficient for this role. Control room needs instrumentation. Parliaments require autonomy, professional capability, institutional memory, scientific and legal advice, reliable data, clear procedures, and technology adequate to the power it is expected to control. The Interparliamentary Union's indicators for democratic parliaments capture this well. An effective parliament must also be accountable, transparent, responsive, inclusive, participatory, and representative. The third proposition, historical institutionalism, describes critical junctures as exceptional periods in which established paths become unsettled and choices generate consequences for decades. Generative AI is such a juncture in at least 5 dimensions. It is universal rather than sectoral. Work, education, health, justice, security, science, and politics are changing simultaneously. It is dual use. The same capabilities that accelerate research can facilitate cyber attacks, manipulation, and coercive surveillance. It is difficult to contain because each firm and each state fears that restraint will mean strategic defeat. It creates dependency, encouraging individuals and institutions to delegate cognitive work to systems they do not understand. And it redistributes epistemic power. Those who control models, data, and compute acquire an unusual ability to organize information, frame choices, and mediate reality itself. The International AI Safety Report published this year records rapid gains in reasoning, coding, and autonomous operation, while warning that reliable pre-deployment testing is becoming harder and that governance remains immature. The United Nations convened the inaugural Global Dialogue on AI Governance in Geneva on 6th and 7th July this year. The European Union AI Act, the Council of Europe Framework Convention, and the OECD principles constitute an architect that clearly is emerging. But 3 regulatory models still compete: rights-based in Europe, market lead in the United States, state-directed in China. It is important to note that 10 days after the United Nations Global Dialogue on AI, China organized in Shanghai the World Artificial Intelligence Conference and its high-level meeting on global AI governance, where 29 states signed an agreement establishing the World Artificial Intelligence Cooperation Organization, WICO, the first intergovernmental organization dedicated to AI, of which, of course, neither the United States of America nor the European Union is a founding member. So within a single fortnight, the global governance of artificial intelligence acquired 2 competing centers of gravity. For parliaments specifically, the danger is twofold. Externally, legislatures must govern systems whose developers possess more information, more talent, and more infrastructure than many states. Internally, parliaments may acquire AI through fragmented procurement, surrender sensitive data to vendors, reproduce hidden bias, and deploy systems that obscure rather than clarify responsibility. An institution already weak in records and expertise can become more dependent under the appearance of modernization. But the opportunity is equally consequential. Generative AI can make vast bodies of legislation, expenditure, administrative action, and citizen input searchable and comparable. It can assist, never replace, drafting, post-legislative scrutiny, budget analysis, and the detection of anomalies. The IPU's 2024 resolution and its guidelines for AI in parliaments, together with the Westminster Foundation for Democracy's expert guidelines, point in the right direction: strategy, governance, human autonomy, risk management, institutional responsibility. So the question is not whether the technology is good or bad in the abstract. It is who governs it, for what institutional purpose, using which data, and subject to whose scrutiny. If politics is a critical risk activity and Parliament its control room, then generative AI should be approached as new instrumentation within a redesigned safety system. That is an institutional revolution, and it has 8 mutually reinforcing dimensions: operational transparency, a public information architecture, preventive oversight, independent knowledge capacity, consequential participation, monetary democracy, protection of the professional permanent state, and protected disclosure. Technology cannot compensate for deliberate opacity. A parliament without control data cannot acquire control AI. 3 safeguards are, in my view, non-negotiable. First, a rejection of technological solutionism. Generative AI is an amplifier. Within a constitutional system, it amplifies scrutiny. Within a capture system, it amplifies surveillance and control. Institutional reform must precede and govern deployment. Second, every parliament AI system has to satisfy the standards of a critical activity. No model should autonomously make legislative, budgetary, or disciplinary decisions or profile citizens and representatives by political belief. Third, constitutional anchoring. AI governance remains rooted in the principles of equal dignity, consent, rights, and separation of powers. Every theory should be tested against a demanding case, and I bring you mine, Argentina, which is an exceptional political laboratory. Today, and for the last 42 years, it has been an electoral democracy with real freedoms, but it retains what Guillermo O'Donnell called delegative traits, and what Carlos Nino diagnosed as a country living at the margins of its own law. The result is not an absence of institutions. We have institutions. It is a recurrent gap between formal design and effective operation. The National Congress of Argentina makes the gap visible. On paper, it has everything: authority to legislate, scrutinize, tax, authorize expenditure, and approve treaties, skilled professionals, a historic library, a congressional budget office, the General Audit Office within its orbit. What it lacks is an integrated strategy that converts those assets into sustained legislative power, a functioning control cycle. The purpose of this diagnosis is not denunciation. It is benchmarking, measuring frequency, quality, consequence, and visibility against the IPU indicators and the strongest comparative practice. Constitutional competence is not effective merely because it exists on paper. How does a parliament get from here to there? First, inventory. Know your functions, processes, people, systems, and data. Second, govern common identifiers, standards, access rules, and security. Third, strengthen the permanent services that turn information into independent institutional knowledge. And only then, fourth, deploy AI at scale through controlled use cases, risk classification, evaluation, continuous audit, and reversibility. Let me return to the questions with which the paper opens, including the oldest one in its newest form. Who will scrutinize the scrutineers? Can a parliament govern a technological transformation advancing faster than its present capabilities? No, without rebuilding those capabilities. But no other democratic institution can replace it. Can generative AI strengthen a parliament that has not resolved its own failures of autonomy, knowledge, and transparency? Only conditionally. The technology will amplify the institutional order or disorder into which it is introduced. And who should control the algorithmic system used in parliamentary work? Parliament itself, of course, through public law, plural governance, professional expertise, independent audit, and effective human accountability, and society through enforceable transparency and rights. The objective, colleagues, is not an artificial parliament. It is a more capable human and democratic parliament, one able to recover institutional memory, test evidence, follow money, hear citizens, and act before failure becomes catastrophe. AI just should augment judgment, never appropriate it, support deliberation, never manufacture consent, and illuminate responsibility, never dissolve it. The critical juncture is still open. The alternative to reform is not technological neutrality. A parliament that declines, listen to this is very important, a parliament that declines to develop its own governing capacity does not preserve the status quo. It increases the asymmetry of power. If parliaments use technology to control power, they can become the institutions the 21st century requires. If they do not, power will use technology to free itself from control. Well, and this is the end. I hope this was interesting for you. It's a very serious matter. For some, AI is not a critical juncture. I think they are wrong. This is the most incredible, disruptive, never seen technology in the history of humanity. And combined with other technological and scientific innovation nowadays, are going to shape completely the world, not just the Earth, but particularly humanity. So the political system, the governance, democracy, and democratic institutions are very important. So we need to put an eye there from different point of view. My point of view is institutional, but I understand that there are others, philosophical, the anthropology, and many others very important that must be combined. Okay, that's all. I will finish here. It has been a real pleasure. A little long the video, but I hope you will have the opportunity to listen, to think a little about my proposal, my thesis, and then to share your thoughts. Thank you very much. See you soon later.